Ghostrunner is a first-person hack-and-slash game about navigating Dharma Tower to stop malevolent forces from augmenting and destroying the lives of its tower citizens. Its emphasis is on gameplay over storytelling, and yet its story is serviceable and its world design intriguing. Its mechanics, while needing a little polish, are solid enough to be entertaining throughout the game's runtime. My first run-in with Ghostrunner is while I happened to be moving across the country. During my downtime, I pulled out my Steam Deck and rolled through the library of 20 or so games I had installed, Ghostrunner being one of them. However, for all the nice things I could say about Ghostrunner, the console experience was absolutely dreadful. The tight, responsive, and fluid movement that Ghostrunner has to offer is completely gimped by switching control schemes from PC to console. What's left is a clunky, frustrating experience from beginning to end, and it should be said that controllers aren't my strong suit. The only reason I have to use a controller is when a game has been better designed for it, or if I have no other option. With that said, unless a player is strongly proficient in using controllers, I doubt they'll have an easy time with this title. The footage on display for this video is all being done on controller unless I explicitly state or show on screen otherwise. At this point, I had played through the game approximately 6 times, and my footage is not indicative of the average player experience. The clunky gameplay resulting from the controller's control scheme directly contradicts the game's protagonist, being a quick-paced, deadly cyber ninja who parkours and swiftly dispatches enemies, then becomes a ninja who awkwardly shifts about corners and spams retries until his tactic finally succeeds. The problem would be somewhat subset if the AI were a little more dumbed down. As is, the AI are capable of impeccably tracking the player and requiring a timing-based approach rather than a reflex one. Actually, it feels inconsistent. Sometimes enemies act in the way you'd expect, and other times they land shots you otherwise would have been safe from. One obvious example of the enemies being somewhat overtuned is the shield enemies, who require being tightly circle-strafed in order to conveniently kill. You can also jump over them and use special attacks against them, but by the end of the fight these enemies are secluded or alone, making the extra effort wasteful or dangerous. Also, samurai parry timings feel off. Sometimes the game is generous and other times you just can't land a parry. This isn't mentioning that they will sometimes fake you out in a way that seems inconsistent. Or they'll dash into each other causing you to miss swing. These mechanics come together to create an experience that needs a little more polish. There's also little in the way of leniency for the player. Bullets are often unreactable despite the flashing light that basic gunmen radiate. It seems as though the white light is difficult to register while in the moment of combat. It's small and can often blend into the background of the later levels when you depend on the flash most. Perhaps if it was a little larger and a different color like red, it would be much more attractive to the eyes of the player. And earlier I touched on the tracking of enemies, but it's inconsistent. Oftentimes there's no rhyme or reason as to why enemies can land dastardly shots or otherwise completely miss. It's luck of the draw. The timing-based dodging is problematic when facing off against these robot enemies because of how wide their attacks are. If you time it right, and by time I mean act preemptively, you can dodge right under or grapple over these attacks, but if the projectiles were just a little slower, players would be able to dodge them based on actual reaction. The distinction between reaction and timing is my primary gripe with Ghostrunner's combat, which is made much more insufferable without the full range of motion that keyboard and mouse provides. Combat isn't something you react to, rather it's going to be planned out over multiple attempts, especially when dealing with the limited movement on controllers. You aren't deflecting bullets based on reaction, you're basing your timing on when the bullet is shot instead of while it's traveling towards you. The only reaction-based gameplay to be had outside of noting enemy positions is during the slowdown that allows the protagonist to dodge past bullets. Yet with so much slowdown, is it even really reaction-based? The only tangible, reactionary element to this game is the parkour segments, which at times are beautifully inspired. If it's not for the struggles that controllers introduce, the parkour segments are easily my favorite part of Ghostrunner. There's a lot of levels that are just wall running on giant billboards and traversing between large empty spaces, but the few moments that were developed with ingenuity make the game's world stand out. A few examples are strafing puzzles and dodging signs atop a train, and even a pseudo-boss fight against a fortified machine. Again, controllers don't do the combat, parkour, or world design in Ghostrunner any justice. It's difficult to believe that the developers' intentions were being followed when developing these console ports. A valuable conversation could be had about whether or not more players should be allowed to experience your media if it hasn't been developed with them in mind. And it's not like Ghostrunner doesn't try. Its default control scheme, while awkward at first, makes a lot of sense from the player perspective. Ghostrunner works best when you can control both the movement of the player character as well as his camera, hence why jump is bound to the right bumper. With your thumbs on the joysticks, you can still jump with your index finger or even your middle finger if you're crazy enough. I played the game with both the default control scheme and by using the A button to jump, and the default control scheme is definitely the more comfortable option. I'm sure with more tweaking, one can come up with the ultimate control scheme, but not everyone wants to dive into changing up their control settings. And the game can be finished on consoles, but for first time play, there is definitely going to be an immense amount of trial and error. While releasing the game on consoles is a great move for getting more exposure for the game, critiquing the game's play experience is easy, low-hanging fruit even. Measuring a developer's intentions with the result of the final product is important to understanding whether or not a piece of media is successful. Where the game has a mediocre story in order to center its focus on the gameplay, the console versions of the game fail to translate that fast-paced action to controllers. On nearly all fronts, the console versions of Ghostrunner fail to strive for success. The developers could have taken many different avenues in order to tackle the issues of playing Ghostrunner on controllers. The game will slightly pan the camera to the side while performing a wall run, but even in heavily structured parkour segments, the player will still need to correct in order to reach the next wall. Likewise, I believe the game could have benefited from a lunge mechanic, and technically it's in the game. If you jump and crouch in rapid succession, the Ghostrunner will experience a speed boost to rival wall running. If this was incorporated as a core mechanic, preferably where only one button needs to be pressed, the Ghostrunner would be well equipped to navigate the majority of these fights. A shift in art style could have also made a great impact on the game's overall readability. If we take enemies' bullets and slow them down a little bit, and then add a cartoonish tracer to them, it would make the combat in Ghostrunner not only more thematically appealing, but also make it easier to dodge bullets. The machine gun bullets already have this effect, but by design these enemies are easy to dodge. When a bullet is deflected by the Ghostrunner blade, the tracer could turn a new color to reflect a change in ownership. Bouncing off my idea from earlier, a larger flash that better lines up with the actual parry timing would work wonders for these samurais. And these ideas aren't original. Many other games have made use of them over the years to deliver gameplay that's simple yet effective, exactly what Ghostrunner should be looking to accomplish. And while it may only be a small audience, it's not just me who recognizes this issue. In an article written by Blake Hester, he asserts, "It's painfully clear this game was not made with consoles in mind, since my time has been plagued by clumsy controls and imprecise platforming." Making keyboard and mouse accessible to console players also isn't a simple solution here. Keyboards are antithetical to the comfort model of gaming on a console. Likewise, certain games like Overwatch have famously banned the control scheme for the advantages computer mice provide to players. Rather, it should have been the developer's responsibility to adapt and develop the game to be more user-friendly to players on controllers. Porting games is a difficult feat, but one that can be lucrative in the long term from revenue to longevity. However, not developing around the affordances that consoles provide can lead your target player base to pan your work. As is, Ghostrunner is just not nearly as enjoyable an experience on consoles as it is on PC. Which is a shame because when you get into it, Ghostrunner is an enjoyable game worth your time. It's just that the game is bogged down by the available control scheme for consoles, which is something the developers clearly choose not to develop much further than unique button mapping. While it's possible that this could be addressed in a future update, I'm not holding my breath. Thank you for watching.